Hello and welcome to What Cheer Writers Club, a nonprofit supporting Rhode Island's writers, illustrators, podcasters, indie publishers with discounted co-working space and events like today's seminar that help local creatives professionalize and publicize their work. I'm Jody Vinson, I'm the program manager here at the club, and I'm so pleased to introduce our panel of experts today on publicity and press for authors. So each of these PR experts are going to share for about 10 minutes from their deep experience in public relations, and then we'll open it up to discussion so you can ask your questions. So let me introduce our panelists. Karen Greco's career in publicity has spanned over 2 decades. With a focus in entertainment, she's executed media relations on behalf of countless actors, writers, musicians, and producers. Her expertise is wide-ranging, with placements in the top national and international outlets like People magazine, Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, NPR, the BBC, and more. She runs a media relations consultancy for early career creatives and is also a freelance journalist and fiction writer. And then next to her, Tess Woods has been in publishing and public relations space for more than 20 years. Before moving to Boston and the PR agency side of things, she worked in-house publicity at Pearson and Wiley in the New York area. Her specialty is nonfiction and business books, and her client list includes S.E. Hinton, Queen Noor, and Madeleine Albright. So huge thanks to Tess for coming all the way down from Boston to be with us today. And then we have Marilyn Bush on the far left, a New England-based publicist, graphic designer, and journalist. Before launching her own consulting business, Marilyn was director of PR and marketing for Trinity Rep and Perishable Theater. As a publicist, Marilyn's goal is to aid individual artists and organizations in identifying and solidifying their personal brand. As a freelance writer, Marilyn's a member of the American Theater Critics Association, a regular contributor to Motif Magazine and the Smithfield Times. And you can find her online at campbush.com. So with that, I'll turn it over to our panelists. Karen, you want to start us out?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here. So I guess, I'm starting. I was going to talk about doing it yourself, because I know that especially for people that are just starting out, if you're independently published, or even if you do have a big publisher behind you, or even a small publisher behind you, publicity can be hard to get. If you're with the Big Five, for example, I know a number of writers who opt to hire their own publicists because the publicists in-house are, they have like 20 titles that they're publicizing, so you don't necessarily get the attention or the focus that you would like. They're sort of like, if Stephen King is on that roster and he's got a book coming out, he's a priority. Sorry. So, and particularly if you're emerging or especially mid-career, it can be really tough to get press attention. So I'm a big fan of doing it yourself. I know for a lot of younger artists, smaller artists, I charge way too much for them to afford me to do a full campaign, and honestly, I feel like you get terrible ROI. It's hard to sort of know where your sales are coming from, and so and it's always sort of a mix of, it's the publicity, but it's also the marketing, it's the advertising, it's the word of mouth. Word of mouth is a big one. And in books, that's going to be your Amazon reviews or your Barnes & Noble reviews or, Goodreads. Sorry. So basically, the good news is everybody in this room is a storyteller. And that's what media outlets are looking for. They're looking for good stories. And so if you can craft a good story that includes you, your work, whatever, that maybe isn't necessarily about, hey, I wrote a book, now give me a review. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So if you can sort of, in your mind, take a look at an outlet that you want to be in and sort of say, okay, how do I fit into this? And how can I sort of tell a bigger story? If you feed that to the journalist, the editor, the producer, whoever it is, you might come out with a piece of journalism about you or sort of like surrounding you, which is really, really cool. It's a lot harder and it's a lot easier to get press right now. There's there are a lot of blogs. There are a lot of podcasts. There are still mainstream outlets, like here, the Providence Journal is probably the biggest one, or now they have competition with the Boston Globe with their new Rhode Island section, which has been really kind of interesting to sort of see what's going on there.
I know.
Because didn't the Globe used to, if you were from Rhode Island and you were pitching the Globe, they would say, we don't cover outside of Boston.
Yeah.
In fact, they stopped covering the Berkshires, like Berkshire Theater Festival,
Right.
and so, like, I was like shocked. I was like, what? But that's Mass, you know. So I was like, ooh, the vultures are circling the pond.
I have the same thought. This is a death knell. Oh, this is live. Hi.
Alan, how are you? But you know, so
He knows.
yeah. But you know, so you're seeing. Okay, so for example, the publication that I work the most with is the New York Times, because I was based in New York for 25 years. I still have New York clients. I still work with them. So with the New York Times, what I've seen in the past 20 years that I've been working with them, and it's all cyclical, right? So 20 years ago when I started and I was doing theater, they wouldn't touch anything that wasn't on off-Broadway or major Broadway, or major off-Broadway, celebrity-driven, that sort of thing. But then you started seeing this turn right around the time that fringe festivals started to become a thing, that they started looking at the smaller storefront, as they call it in Chicago, theater movement that was happening downtown, or indie theater movement, as New York likes to call it. And that was buoyed by the dot-com boom, not because of the dot-com's influence, it was because the dot-com was buying advertising in traditional media. So all of a sudden, the New York Times had all of these pages, these ad pages, and they had more editorial pages that they needed to fill, so they started doing a lot more coverage. This is how it all works, right? This is internally how it all works. So when I'm pitching a client and I get a no, it's not necessarily because they don't think that client is worthwhile, they just don't have the space. Now it's about pixels, and now because you can track, right, you can sort of track how many readers a story has. They can see where readers abandon a story. You know, they can see where they're getting the influx of readers. This is all now that on the back end, they can see all of this, and this is changing the way that they cover things. So it becomes, I will say right now, the personal essay was like a big thing a number of years ago, and they saw the personal essay boom. But I am still seeing that in different ways in the culture pages. So like the New York Times is doing a lot more critics' notebooks. And it's sort of the I is becoming a lot more prevalent with the journalists writing. So in that, I would say, like, there's an opportunity, right, for writers. Do you have a personal story that you can share, that you can tell? And how do you tell that, and what outlet do you go to? I'm sorry, I know that if this is so big, like it's a big topic and it's a big thing to start with. So I'm probably better with like direct questions when we get to that point. But I think that if you are savvy about it and smart about it and focused, because it's a big media world out there, so if you can focus, it's a completely doable thing to sort of take this on yourself. You just have to have a really thick skin and be okay with no. And no doesn't mean no forever. No just means not right now. So you can go back to the well again and again and again and again with different story ideas. And what I love about you doing it yourself, for example, is that you then develop the relationship with the editors, the writers, the journalists, the producers. And so it's not my relationship that you need. You don't need that. You have your own relationship, and so they'll call you. So, you know, like the best thing in the world is like finally pitching, and no, and then one day out of the blue you got a call, and they're just like, hey, I'm doing a story on this thing, and I want to talk to you, and that's where the payoff comes. You know, it might take a week. Honestly, sometimes you just hit the zeitgeist and you're like, boom, and it takes off. It might take years. I mean, I have pitched the same have pitched the same story for 3 years and nothing has happened, and then suddenly something will click. And then the story will happen. I actually was pitching a story about a bar, theater bar, for years, and nothing ever came of it, and then there were like 4 stories in a row about it. It just, so it's about just having patience to sort of stick with it, and tenacity, and being polite, and also knowing what makes a good story for these outlets. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, there'll be time for questions for everyone at the end.
Great. Hi. So I was asked to really talk about things from a publisher point of view, and that's a very, like you're saying, it's a big topic, and I know there's people in this room who either have publishers, want publishers, or self-publishing. So the biggest advice I have for working with publishers in finding one, there's big, there's small, and then there's self, is really make sure that the publisher is your genre. You don't want to be the only cookbook in a nonfiction publisher. You don't want to be the children's book at a business publisher. So make sure you're in the right place, and then ask them what they're going to do as far as supporting you with the marketing and the publicity. In the last 20 years, publishing houses have changed drastically. Publicity staffs are almost non-existent in many of them. So what you want to do is make sure that there is a plan for you. Where do you fit on the list? Just like you were saying, Karen was saying that, if Stephen King's on that list, he's getting the attention. Every list has an A list, a B list, a C list. Everyone wants to go be the next bestseller, and the question is, are they even printing enough books to be a bestseller? And these are questions you can ask. What's the first print run? If it's 500, you're not going to be a bestseller. They kind of pinpoint who they think the bestsellers are going to be ahead of time, and they put all their support behind those, be it the Stephen Kings, the John Grishams, things like that. So you really just want to make sure you have a clear picture of where you are and what they can provide for you. Many these days do suggest you hire out, which is good news for all of us, bad news for your wallets. But when you do hire out, then you also want to ask them, what will you do to complement those services? Sometimes they'll back off and they'll do nothing, whereas others, they should really complement what we do. And a lot of times the way to complement when you hire out is they'll handle book reviewers and trade publications, and we'll handle everybody else. And that seems to be the best mix, but you have to be your own advocate. So always ask questions, have an agent who asks questions. Don't be afraid to hear the tough answers, because that's going to know where to start, and don't start too late asking about publicity. All too often I'll get a call from someone who's like, well, my book came out 2 months ago and they didn't do anything. Okay, well, we should have talked 8 months ago. So that kind of thing. When it comes to reviews, which is another thing we were going to talk about. Now, reviews are wonderful. They're not like they used to be. Talking about ink and ad pages, book editors are the first people to go. My world of business books is pretty much where I come from. The Wall Street Journal book has a book review every day. Rarely is it a business book. Fortune doesn't do them anymore. Forbes doesn't do them anymore. So you've got The Economist, you've got Financial Times. The books that get reviewed come from big publishers most of the time. Current events, politics, history, biographies, fiction. Fiction's a world I don't really know about, so I don't talk about it much, but I think you know more about fiction. Hardcovers. If it's a soft cover how-to, it's probably not going to get a review in one of those big places. The locals, like the Providence Journal, the Boston Globe, they want that local angle. They'll review Buddy CNC or Whitey Bulger, but they may not review, well, actually Stephen King's a bad example, but whatever the hot topic is today. So to have a hot topic in a big publisher is your best bet at one of those big review places. Each reviewer out there has different requirements. They need a galley 3 to 4 months in advance. Some like 2, some like 3. Some like you to send it to everybody. So it's all different in getting to know who each of those people are. The trade publications like a Publisher's Weekly or Kirkus, they like them in advance. Those are really the best places to get a review early for the book buying people, the librarians, the book buyers, the Amazon purchasers. That's what they read. The big book review editors read that too, so the New York Times, the LA Times, those sorts of places. So those things all still exist. But really pay attention to what your book is and what's being reviewed in those publications. So really, it's really about knowing your audience. I remember I had an author tell me once that his sister's roommate's cousin's niece has a friend at Oprah, and she said, if I could get on, I could be a bestseller. Well, besides that initial reaction, I said, you have a mergers and acquisitions book. So even that person's not going to get you on Oprah. And you could have a full hour on Oprah and you're not going to sell one book to her audience. So it's really about knowing where your readers are. And that's why the biggest focus should always be on the off the book page. And much like writing your own story, what I look at from the nonfiction and business point of view is what you're saying. Who are you? Do you have the credibility to talk about this? Can you write an op-ed? Can I pitch you as an expert in the field? Can you be included in a feature about said topic? If you have a nonfiction book such as that, I say if you have 300 pages, you have 300 pitches. It's not just, I have this book. Don't ever start a pitch with there's this book, because they're just going to delete you and say go to the book editor. So you start with the thesis, you start with a part of it. There's always tentacles in a book. You know, it could go to a women's writer, it could go to a mergers and acquisitions writer, it could go to manufacturing. It just to find the different angles and pull out the pieces of interest. And that not only includes, it gives you more credibility if you can say you're quoted in Forbes, if the book is mentioned in Forbes, like all of these sorts of things just add to credibility. And generally speaking, when you're writing a nonfiction or a business book, it's really to build your platform in a different way. It may not just be book sales. So that off the book page is huge. Other things in the off the book page is radio tours. Those are still going on. I look at those as a very good complement a lot to what's going on in print and online. The number of impressions you hit is always best. There's lots of business shows, talk shows, news shows. There is less and less on the airwaves than there used to be, because a lot of the daytime and the nighttime has turned into syndicated national programming. But the local talk shows, again, if you have that local angle, or there's news and business shows like in San Francisco, New York, you name it, the big markets still have that programming. But it's all about podcasts now, as we know here. You know, podcasts are the new radio. And one thing, again, going back to knowing your audience, it's like, you know, the best podcast out there could be NPR, which of course it probably is, and we all want to be on it, and we all deserve to be on it, but the chances of being on it are also tougher. But again, if you're that cookbook, you want the cooking podcast. You don't belong on the true crime podcast that's been #1 for the last 20 months. So sometimes I say that they're not sexy where you want to be, but it's so targeted that it'll lead to sales book, a client, a speaking engagement, a publishing contract. So really just my biggest message is know your audience. Be the expert in your field. Don't be afraid to say you're the expert. That's what I say, it's hard to self-promote sometimes. and sometimes that's where we can help as far as, it's hard to say, I'm the best, I know this topic, but let us do that. We can be your cheerleader. And that's my world of nonfiction.
Thank you, Tess.
I feel like mine is so basic. But it dovetails nicely into what she's saying about know your audience and know your angles. I'll start with branding and identity, and it's the one thing that I know makes my actor, author, musician friends just cringe, because they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself. I don't want to brand myself. It's so corporate. And it's not like a brand, like I am marked with this brand for the rest of my life and Scarlet A kind of a thing. It is literally being able to talk about yourself and being aware of yourself from the outside. So instead of thinking of yourself as, am I Coca-Cola, am I Pepsi, am I this, am I that, I always tell people branding starts with you being self-aware. You need to be able to step outside of yourself and be able to talk about, and this is the thing, everybody's so weird, I'm bashful about doing it, about talking about myself, self-promoting, and identifying, what I am and what I do, because, you don't want to brag. It's not that. You have to put all of that aside, and in order to sell yourself, in order to be seen on the market or on the shelf as a product, which you kind of are, although we hate to say it, you are and your work is. So in order to be seen on that shelf, you can't be generic down at the bottom and blend in. You have to be clear on that shelf so that people say, oh, I know what that is. That's gonna do this for me. And that's what branding is. And in order to, this is really basic, is you kind of have to take the time to become an expert on yourself. And let's not even talk about your product right now and what your work is. Let's just talk about you. Because it's not about the book. Because you can't go in and say, I wrote a book. That's great, everybody wrote a book. It's about, hi, this is who I am. And who I am has created this art, but they want to talk to you. They want to put a face to it. They want you to be an expert at something. So it's not necessarily about the work. It starts with you. And so I'm going to give you an exercise when you get home. How to become an expert on yourself and what you bring to the table. So literally, just take all the doubt and all the whatever, just put it aside and give yourself an hour or two or an afternoon and a notebook, okay? And the reason for this, and it sounds like, oh, is it selfish? No. You need to be able to know what makes you special, okay? And you need to know what it is you bring, not just the table to the marketplace, but to the world. And you need to be able to talk about that in ways that, it's not bragging, that are factual, okay? So, because nobody's gonna come along and be like, tell me more about yourself, tell me more about your art. They're not gonna do it. You have to start out by saying, this is what I am, and I know myself, and this is what makes this fantastic product. And I know you're all different kinds of writers, so this will be kind of general. So first off, you need to collect all the facts, because you'll need it at some place or another. And I'm literally saying write notes on yourself, because you're gonna come out with a clear picture, hopefully, of who you are, how you come off, things that make you you, okay? And really start with the basics, who you are. I am a 51-year-old woman who has 3 children, and they're all boys. And they all rule my house. And it is like crazy camp, and that is why my business is called Camp Bush, because I don't run Camp Bush. Camp Bush is all overrun. But it makes me who I am, because that is where I work from, is the place of trying to organize chaos, okay? And so it's, who are you, aside from the basics? Where do you come from? What's your education? What parts of your life have led you to this place today? Everywhere you've worked, everywhere you've studied, all of that is important. From places you've lived, it all matters. Where you graduated, if you graduated from college, where you took classes, it all matters. Because there's an angle there. When we talk about angles, alumni magazines are fantastic angles, because you went there. You graduated, and if you have something that you've made or you've done, you can then go back to them, and it's not an easy pitch, but it's an easier pitch, because you're a product of where they want to say, oh, look, again, branding, products, you're their product. So I like to think about it as, if they're gonna make this Netflix movie of your life, where would the bullet points be? What would be the things that they would mention, okay? And again, you have to kind of step back from yourself and just try to look at the facts. And then I want you to go deeper, and because this is all what informs your writing, what are you passionate about, okay? When you talk about your favorite things or about your writing, are you funny? Are you dry? Are you factual? Are you just so enthusiastic about all the research you did? What is it when you talk about your favorite things, or eventually this will be when you talk about your work? How do you approach it? So, because that's your style. how you normally talk about your favorite thing is pretty much how you're gonna come off when you're doing a book tour and you're doing a reading and you're taking questions. You kind of need to be self-aware about that because that is part of your brand. People know Spalding Gray, they knew what they were gonna get from a Spalding Gray reading, or you know what you're gonna get when you go to a bookstore to see a children's book author. I'm being general, but you know, you have to kind of know who you are and how you come off when you're talking about something you like. And also be aware of what have people told you about yourself. Take it, some of it, you know, people say I'm bossy, people say I'm loud. Write it down. I'm not saying they're right, I'm just saying that's one of the ways that people see you, okay? Start thinking about, these are my strengths as a person. These are my weaknesses as a person. I know it sounds like really kind of touchy-feely stuff, but really, it will be helpful in the long run when you're looking at yourself, because these are your qualities that make you absolutely unique. And if you're aware of what makes you special, and you're looking at it as facts, when you deliver it to someone as a pitch, and you're self-pitching, it's not bragging, it's factual, okay? And try to get in touch with all of the things that your emotions, okay? What makes you laugh? What makes you cry? What are the things that make you want to write? Okay? What, your passions, okay? And all of this leads to who you are as a writer, which informs the product that you make. And I hate to use the word product, but it is a product in the marketplace. So what I like to say to people I've worked with is that everybody's like, well, I just write books about, I'm just, no. You are the only you that came from this set of education, background, experiences, and that absolutely adds up to what you're putting out as your writing work. There's no one else that's gonna write the same type of thing the way you do. So that's what makes you unique. And then once you start looking at that and you can describe it, then you can put that forth as, this is my identity, this is my brand. And then you have a language to describe what you bring, okay, and what your work brings. And that's the core of your brand, because all of that informs the language you're gonna use in your bios and your website. It all is informed by who you are, because it needs to be real, and it needs to be the truth. Because if you say, oh, I'm this, and you're not, people know. If you really need to kind of do the homework to say, no, really, this is kind of who I am. Take it or leave it. This is who I am, and this is what I bring to the market, and this is why I make the product I make. Once you have an idea and you've kind of looked at yourself in this really clinical way, then your branding it's so much easier because you've done the factual homework. So, okay, this is the second exercise, right? This is not touchy-feely at all. This is about having the web presence that you need, and this is definitely DIY. You can hire somebody to do this for you, but I'm telling you, this is what you need to do if you're doing this for yourself. Go online and Google yourself, okay? I'm sure we've all done it, because I have to. Google yourself plus author. Google yourself plus Rhode Island. What are the things that come up? What are the top 10 things that come up? Are you listed? Are you in there at all? Are there pictures of you? Is it all your Facebook? With you going like, dude, what comes up? Because that sometimes is the first experience people have of meeting you. It's the first, they're sniffing around for a first date. And if they see something they like, then they will pursue it further. If they see, I don't know who this person is, if you're invisible, they will not pursue it further, okay? So you need to make sure that the things that should come up in those top 10 are your website, your Facebook page, your any business or membership listings that you have, your membership for Cheer Writers Club, your LinkedIn, if you decide to go that way. Your Facebook will, your private, your non-public Facebook should probably come up too, because they do, unless you really get those privacy settings locked in, which I would recommend doing. Just saying. That's a whole different workshop. If there's any, are there links to buy your book? Is there any mention of your work? Let's see what comes up and how far you have to drill down to find yourself, okay? Because the goal is to make sure you come up in those top 10. You should be all of those top 10 listings, okay? I am a just dogged self-promoter from my other career, which is as an actress, and if you Google Marilyn Bush actress, I'm there. Now, mostly if you Google Marilyn Bush actress Rhode Island, I'm there. But it's important to be, your name should be you. Your name should not be, oh, that other, it should be you. And that's how you should come up. So in order to do that, to succeed, you then need to take all this information that you've compiled about yourself and your identity and your brand. And you need to have a really well-made website, okay? These are the 5 must-haves that you need to have, okay? You need a website for yourself. Yes, you're going to be listed other places, but I highly recommend that you have a website where you control the message. People can talk about you, great, but have a website where you control the message, you tell people what you want to say about yourself, and you present yourself like you would for a first date, because a lot of times this is how people are going to meet you. You want to be ready, you want to be dressed, and you want to wow them. And you want them to be interested in what they see. So every aspect of the site reflects who you are. So if you can't navigate it, are they scatterbrained? Is this person scatterbrained? Are they cluttered? It all reflects who you are. People judge you based on the materials you're presenting. So you want a really clean, really easy to navigate website that has all the information there ready. Who you are, what you do, why you write, what you write, all of the basics. Please put contact information. I can't tell you how many authors' websites I'm like, but I just want to write to you. I just want to send you a thing. How come I can't contact you? And I hate contact us forms, but that's a whole other panel too. Just easy to find. Who you are, I want to see a picture of you, I want to see your work. All of that needs to be there, and they've made website design so easy with Wix and Squarespace, and depending upon your budget, just invest in the time to get your materials together so that they're clean and professional, and that all that information is there, okay? And then you can work on, how do I figure out how to do this SEO, search engine optimization, so I come up. Once your material's there and it's easy to find, you can then work on getting everything to come up the way you want. So for this website to look professional and for your brand to be tight so that you are on the shelf and people know what that is, your website is your billboard. It's up 24 hours a day. Anybody can look at it for free. This is your best investment if you have zero money or a very small budget. Invest in yourself and your website, because that's the way you're gonna get your brand out there. In order to do that, make sure you have a high resolution headshot, a good headshot. I'm not saying you necessarily have to pay money. If you don't have the money, I love a professional photographer. But if you don't, you have your iPhone or whatever your phone is, and that fantastic portrait mode, or phones take high definition photos now, which to me is like a miracle of modern technology. Just go outside, stand in front of a bush, stand in front of a brick wall, sit on your fire escape. I don't care what, stand in front of that flower thing is beautiful. Okay, anything, look good, smile, have a high resolution picture of yourself. Do not take it with your dog, please, because if I see one more author picture with like,
This one's mine.
right? Just you, being you, is all they need. But we need to see that, okay? And it doesn't need to be, does anybody remember Olin Mills? Glamour shots? Just you outside looking good, okay? And then once you have, make sure you have that photo. Make sure you have the cover art or whatever your art is associated with your book, your cover. Because again, they need to be able to say, oh, I know this is her work, or this is his work on the shelf, okay? Then make sure you have this is the freest thing, although you give your privacy away, is your Facebook page. Okay, so you want a page that is you as a business. So it's you as a persona, not personal, but you as your name author, your name poet, your name historian, whatever you have realized is your brand, okay? And so once you have that page, all your content across the board should be exactly the same as your website. Yes, duplicate it. Great. That's consistency of message. It is not like I already said that. Nope. You want to make sure it's all the same across the board, because the more you repeat it, by the 9th time, someone will actually listen to you. Right? Isn't it 9?
Maybe.
True.
7.
Right. And then, your Facebook page can be a place where you then can cultivate yourself and your audience and your voice. And kind of I find it a really good trial way to cultivate your voice to your audience, because you can share things with them and see what lands and see what doesn't. But that's for another thing. So you need a branded website with photos, gorgeous photos, high resolution, I say, not for the online component, but have a high resolution photo so when they do call you from the New York Times, you can send them a decent picture, because I can't tell you how many times people are like, I don't have a picture. How do you not have a picture of yourself? You need it, and it needs to show who you are as a brand. Little things that I also would say are really important. Please don't have an email address that is like imthebestbookwriter@gmail.com or Susie Yoo-hoo. Although I can't say it because we're live, but that's a different conversation. If you can't afford to get info@yourname.com, just go get, this is perfectly fine these days, is yournameauthor@gmail. Your booking@gmail. People do it all the time. People don't see that it's a Gmail. It's not like the days where you have a Hotmail address. Oh, you're so professional. This is how you can brand on the cheap. And also, highly recommend getting a Google Voice line, because if people can call you, Google Voice is free if you don't know about this. You can customize your area code, so I don't know, you can say you're in LA. You can't anymore?
They've run out of some area codes.
Oh, yeah, like
401 is
Manhattan,
hard to get.
the really
Yeah.
nice sections of Manhattan you can't get.
Yeah.
It's like anything. But I really think that's important, because it's not, you don't need a solid mailing address these days. You just need, to be there on the World Wide Web. But a phone number says, oh, I am professional. And it's not your same phone number that it's going to go to your phone in your back pocket, and you can screen it so that you can go see it later, or you don't even have to answer it, but it reads to people like, oh, I'm a business, I have an office, I have a business identity. So then you need to make sure that all of these little tidbit parts of all of these, your website, your social media, make sure that everything is branded like your business, like your email signature. Fantastic place to put your name, your website, your Amazon links, a little review, a link to your Facebook page. That is free advertising for yourself, okay? Just make sure that even your outgoing message on Google voicemail, it all is part of the packaging so that you're branding yourself as a professional at what you do, and not someone who is, it's not, you're not lying. You're coming forward with the best, most professional face that you can on a very limited budget. But, so that's my 4 pages of notes. Hopefully it's helpful.
Let's thank our panelists before we move into question and answer. All right, so we do want to take your questions for the panelists. If you want to just do one question until we make sure we cover everyone's questions, and if you have anything that's just relevant to your project, there'll be time to chat one-on-one afterwards as well. So we can take your questions. They can take your questions now. Yes, in the back.
Hi, so I'm kind of new to this, never published anything, I'm just kind of entering this world. What piece of advice would you have for starting to gain traction and starting to, I don't want to say get attention, but starting to publicize and starting to get attention.
What do you do, like, what do you write, what do you?
I'm a poet, and I also, that part is still in flux, I guess. I work on a lot of different things.
We need to talk about your branding statement, honey.
Yeah. Don't have one of those yet. But once I do, would you say that like website, social media is the place to start, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What publishers are looking for always, no matter what genre, is your platform and what you bring to the table. So you want to have a presence, much like we were just talking about with, Googleable, but have a social media following, a website, a blog, a podcast, any of those things,
Okay.
and really start to be consistent. And then to be consistent speaking to those sites. So find places you like to read or poets you like and comment and become part of the conversation, either on Twitter or social media or specifically in the areas you're looking at.
I think absolutely publishers are looking at platforms now. If your goal is to get a publisher, they really want to know, do you have an email list and how big it is? Are you active on Twitter and how many followers do you have and how engaged are they? That's a big one now, is your engagement numbers. So social media probably is one of the best easiest places and cheapest to start out and start the interactions. I know for poets, a number have found like success on Instagram. And it's sort of becoming a thing, and it's really opening poetry up to a bigger audience. So I would, because I will say I do everything wrong, Marilyn.
Well, we're
we're
self-promoting.
We really are. So don't feel bad, but I always say, like, because it is really overwhelming. Like, I know I'm juggling a lot, and it's so overwhelming for me. I have like 10 Facebook group pages that I need to juggle, and so find one, right? One, whether it's going to be Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. Find one where you're comfortable and where your tribe is, and focus on that.
Tribe is key.
So that you're not completely overwhelmed.